All right, we will call the meeting to order. This is our executive meeting of council for February 23rd, 2023. I had to think about that. Haven't had any regrets? Did you get regrets?
I didn't, but I'm pretty sure that Calvin is.
Okay.
Yeah, that he wasn't going to be around.
Okay.
I saw that.
Excellent. So regrets from Councillor d'Entremont. Next, we have on our agenda, we have the invitation to stand and move, as Councillor Donaldson just demonstrated to us. So anytime you feel the need to get up and move around, feel free to do so. Number 3, approval of agenda. So the agenda is presented to you. Does anybody have any additions to the agenda? Okay, seeing none, our agenda will stand as it is. Conflict of interest. Is there anybody who has a conflict of interest to declare with any of the agenda items? Seeing none, remember you can declare conflict at any time. So number 4, adoption of minutes. So the minutes are there from the February 9th, 2023 regular council meeting. Can we have somebody approve those minutes? Moved by Councillor Bourque, seconded by Councillor Donaldson. Councillor Digdon, sorry. Any questions on that? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary minded, motion carried. Next we have number 5. We have Aaron Ferguson with WSP, who is here, who will talk to us about the wind development project we had. We had a meeting, I'm not sure if you remember, a while ago, where we had looked at the wind development and we had deferred parts of that plan. So we had a PAC meeting yesterday and Erin presented to us and we made a recommendation, but she's going to go through it. I'm not going to steal your thunder. Go ahead, Erin.
Good evening, the chair. So as outlined in the report, there was a series of wind amendments in both the MPS, Municipal Planning Strategy, and in the Land Use Bylaw that were before Council in December at a public hearing. As part of the public hearing, there was some concern that the Land Use Bylaw amendments in Section 8.1 related to the specified setback distance from a lot line might be too restrictive and might prevent wind energy projects from locating on certain types of lots, namely those long, narrow lots within the municipality. So as part of their decision, council at the time approved a portion of the amendments, and that was the MPS amendment. The big one there is to amend the 1 kilometer separation distance from a wind turbine to a residential dwelling, amending that to be to permanent residences and removing seasonal dwellings and camps from that 1 kilometer separation. So the portion that's back before you tonight is section 8.1. And in looking at land use regulations, often we're kind of looking for a best fit scenario. No one solution really works for every circumstance. We're trying to find a reasonable approach that works in most cases. And part of finding that best fit is actually through the public process, like the public hearing in December. And we heard through that process that the proposed solution wasn't going to be a good fit for many properties within the municipality. So we kind of took that back and did a bit of a workshop with staff and kind of came up with a number of options for council's consideration. That was taken to PAC last night, and they recommended that council go with option 2. And just quickly, the 3 options are outlined in the report that you'll have available to you. The first is leaving it as was originally proposed, and that would be a setback equal to 2 times the total turbine height, so measured from the top of the turbine blade at the top of the arc to the ground below, or 300 meters, whichever distance was greater. Issues with this, as mentioned, are that doesn't work for certain lot configurations, and it can be a little bit too restrictive. Also, we heard from a wind proponent at the PAC meeting last night that there's even challenges just identifying where the lot lines are. So for that reason, it is also a bit problematic. The second option, which is the one that PAC recommended, is modifying the separation distance from being keeping it 1 kilometer for permanent residences, but introducing a second separation distance, a lesser one of 300 meters. And that would be from the wind turbine to seasonal dwellings or camps. And this was done in recognition that that 1 kilometer really kind of covers everything, nuisance related things like noise, shadow impact, as well as safety concerns. And removing the camps and the dwellings from that would be appropriate in many circumstances, but there could still be potential safety impacts related to ice throw or blade shed, even though these carry a very small risk. That kind of impact area is generally considered to be about 300 meters. So that kind of adds in that extra check for the most common rural uses, which would be impacted by wind turbines, and that would be like the seasonal dwellings and camps. The third option proposed is to just keep the 1 kilometer separation for permanent residences and not introduce any kind of secondary setback for seasonal dwellings or camps. So just to reiterate that one, that in the third case, option 3, that separation distance would only apply to permanent dwellings. I just wanted to note as well that all 3 of those options still go through that development agreement process. And what that does is it does allow you to adjust certain parameters on a case-by-case basis. And it also has a public input process built in, which could also bring other considerations up for council's review, and council could amend some of those provisions if they felt it was appropriate. The 3 options are all a reasonable approach. But I think in looking at option number 2, that kind of gets back to that best fit. I think that the reason number 2 has been proposed in the planning or in the planner's report for you is just that it is that looking at kind of it'll work in most circumstances based on the lot configurations, but it'll also kind of protect the seasonal dwellings and camps a little bit. So it really applies to the most common uses that you might see out in the areas that would be impacted by the wind turbine. So it's kind of, again, getting back to that best case scenario, but there would still be flexibility through that DA process. I just want to give a quick summary up front, but if anyone is interested, I know many of you went through the presentation with you at length last night. I have it available here, and we can jump to different sections if there are questions, or if anybody would like the full presentation, I can do that as well.
Thank you, Erin. Are there questions for Erin? Anybody have any questions or comments? Councillor Surratt.
I believe this would be for Erin. Did anybody take into consideration that seasonal dwellings camps, some people go there in May and they leave in October. So that would, when you come to think of it, that would be, like 6-7 months. So I know you're putting the separation here different for seasonal dwellings and camps. So did they take that into consideration, or was that talked about at all?
Yes. So again, it's kind of going back to the idea of the kind of that best fit scenario. It was felt that if all seasonal dwellings and camps were included in that 1 kilometer distance, as it was originally written in the MPS, that might be too restrictive for allowing kind of development of wind energy in different areas of the community. So it would basically having any seasonal dwelling or any camp in that circumstance would be required. A wind turbine would have to be 1 kilometer away from any of them, anywhere, and that could impact the potential locations and the ability for wind proponents to develop a viable project in areas with greatest wind potential. So that was considered in that because these are more temporary uses, again, along a continuum. And if such time they were converted into more of a permanent use, then that 1 kilometer would apply to any new turbine being sited. But just kind of looking at along that continuum and kind of find the approach that'll fit in most circumstances. That's why that lesser 300 meters. So again, that won't necessarily cover noise and shadow flicker, which is more of the considerations that are contemplated in that 1 kilometer, but it would address safety concerns. So it's what's being proposed is really kind of trying to find that balance between allowing wind development and facilitating that in areas where there is high wind potential and where it makes sense to do so, but also trying to mitigate that through the 2 tiers, I would say, of separation distance. So.
Thank you.
I think, Councillor Surratt, part of our conversation last night was, this was developed in order for developers to come in, and we're trying to promote and we're trying to grow wind energy in our municipality. So we're trying to set up the guidelines for that. And by keeping 1 kilometer for everybody, the camps and the seasonal dwellings could prohibit some developers to come in.
Of course.
And really, we don't have data to say how many people stay in their camps for this amount of time or how many. So you had to kind of go big spectrum and think about,
Getcha.
right, the bigger picture. And I guess for the bigger picture is those seasonal dwellings, there still is some protection, because in option 3, there really, it was the whole 1 kilometer thing. So this has some protection for them, and we're kind of assuming that most of them are seasonal and not, but you're right, there are some that are going to be long-term, but it's difficult to know. It's really hard to figure out how many are, but that was kind of the logic.
You did speak about it, and great. That's what I want to know. Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Sonia.
Thank you. This is just to be clear, these boundary guidelines or boundary proposals we have here is to protect existing structures, correct? So anybody that would want to build anything closer after the windmills would be there would be able to?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
That's correct.
what we had talked about yesterday.
Yeah.
So that would be their choice. They could do that.
Okay.
So there is a recommendation. The presentation has been attached. We had a meeting yesterday. She gave the full presentation. We discussed different options, and we felt like option number 2 was the best option for us. So is there do we have any opposition to that? If not, we could pass first reading of this if people are okay with option 2, unless there are other questions or comments on that. Councillor Surratt?
I'd like to make a motion that we take option 2, if that's the request.
First reading.
First
Yeah.
reading, yeah.
Do we have a seconder? Okay, seconded by Councillor Donaldson.
On the discussion, I mean, we can look at West Pumtico, I mean, there's 20-yard dwelling. And on the motion, we can use West Pumtico for an example, because there's, I believe, 20-something dwellings within the kilometer, right? So, I mean, this is really stretching the boundaries out to give people way more protection than our initial first project was. God, I don't know how many years ago now, 20-something, anyhow. So, good.
Councillor Sonia?
Thank you. This is probably best answered by Alain. There's been a concern about if the windmills are in place and something goes wrong, such as a noisy bearing, fire, you name it, whatever can go wrong. Is there protection against, for instance, if the bearing was noisy, could it be forced to be shut down immediately until repairs come? That is a question that came from citizens, because there can be noisy if a bearing goes, or anything to that nature.
Right. The answer is yes, there's protection. So, and there's better protection now than there used to be. Prior to some of the more recent, and I shouldn't say immediate changes here, but recently we had changes to say that wind turbines had to fall within a certain distance, but also there had to be an agreed upon development agreement between the council and the developer. So inside that development agreement, typical things that would be included in any development agreement, and in particular this one, would be things like noise, could be shadow flicker, could be other nuisances that wind turbines could emit, including failure, mechanical failure, or mechanical repair. The development agreement will stipulate what is required in those circumstances. And the developer will have to comply with that development agreement. And if they don't comply, then there would be other ramifications, including, review of the development agreement. And from a practical perspective, I don't know how far that needs to go. From a practical perspective, the developers have always been very eager to solve that problem because they know that the solution puts them in a better position community-wise. Now, while the wind turbines that are developed come with a level of like or dislike, depending on who's looking at them, the wind developers make it a point that the community gets a dividend for that development. So, for instance, we've had some in Wedgeport where a dividend goes to, nonprofit organizations. This particular development that could happen in Wedgeport would be far greater. Therefore, the community feedback would be far higher. So, I hope that we wouldn't have to enforce our development agreement. The development agreement is enforceable, and it is something that we could include in the wording to make sure that everybody understands their rights and their limitations around that. There are other development agreements that we have seen and signed that have to do with smell, that have to do with fumes and other such things. And if that's a problem, that they're going to be forced to deal with it. They have to invest in a scrubber or whatever it is, whatever the case may be. And that's something that both of you agree to, and it's a legal agreement. So if somebody's not complying, then you have a legal problem, right? Hopefully it never gets to that, but you do have that extra level of protection today. Now, the other thing I didn't mention was the fact that you could have protection through environment, and other levels of government could have protection to support the community as well. I'm less familiar with that. Environment may have some stipulations when they do these kinds of approvals. They might say that you're fine provided that you do X, Y, Z. They have to comply with X, Y, Z. That I'm less familiar with, but I can assure you that there are other levels of government that have that compliance as well. I hope that answers your question.
It does, thank you.
Councillor Digdon.
Yes, and the only thing I would say there, I do know from being around the windmills, some down in Pubnico, and being around the people that own them, and that it is of their best interest to stop that. If they have a windmill that's having problems, it's their best interest to stop it so they don't have to, so it doesn't create a bigger problem, or more damage to their expensive equipment. And over the years down home, they've been very, very good to the community. The windmills have been very good for the community. Yes, there was one that caught on fire one day, and you can Google, windmills today, wind turbines catching on fire. It's a very, very small percentage, but it's like anything else, it's mechanical, so there can be problems. But all in all, they've been good, so it's the company down home. So, yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, the motion on the floor is that we approve and give first reading to the land use bylaw amendment to facilitate wind energy development as outlined in the provisions associated with option 2. Is everybody okay with that? All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary minded, motion carried. Thank you, Erin.
Thank you. Good night.
Okay, next we have, under number 6, 7-day notice, Article C16, low-income property tax exemption. There's an attachment and a spreadsheet. We talk about this regularly, how our thresholds change. There are some changes to the, thank you. There are changes to the bylaw, to the policy, sorry. Did you want to speak to that, Deputy CAO?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have made some changes to this policy that you're referring to, the attachment. What I've just circulated there is just a few more changes to it.
More changes.
It's in highlighted in blue, and I apologize that it wasn't attached, but it was just something that was catched at the last minute from our revenue administrator that kind of oversees this policy. So we just picked up on a few little things. So I would I'm asking council to consider these changes or could just go with what's, was presented to you in your attached documents, but I'm just suggesting this is what, was suggested by our staff member that actually administers this policy, so.
Okay. It's nothing major,
No, nothing
a
major.
little bit of wording.
Just wording, yeah, just clarification, really.
CEO Muse?
Yeah, I feel responsible for the financial piece that I want to raise.
30
Deputy
seconds.
CA,
Go.
30 seconds is good. That's all I need, plus or minus 5 minutes. So the policy has been worded and changed in accordance to what the Deputy CEO has indicated, and he's worked very closely with Bonnie on this. But there's an item here that you should be aware of, and this is not for approval tonight, so you have time. But we anticipated the fact that there are some significant increases in assessment over the past 12 months. And so there are some potential low-income individuals that will be impacted very negatively by that reality. So there's a variety of ways that you can deal with that problem. One of the ways that we're proposing here today is to significantly increase the thresholds of your low-income exemption policy. So what that essentially means is an admission, in a way, that costs are escalating. But what we're saying is that that's the truth. But what we're saying, in fact, as well, is that more people will be entitled to the rebate that is being placed upon them. So if you've noticed, the changes to your thresholds and to your amounts have dramatically changed. There is a document that talks about the potential increase in cost to the municipality when you consider the changes to the amounts that are being provided. So there's actually two changes that are being proposed. One is the amount, and the other is your income thresholds. So your income thresholds have taken a rather sharp increase, and that's due to the recommendations that are coming through taxation, which are coming through recommendations from the province. The provincial rebate forms and rebates that are available provincially was their thresholds significantly influenced our thresholds. So I guess what I'm trying to say in a much simpler way is costs are going up, but if you're low income, costs are going down because you will be entitled to a rebate far greater than you had before, and your income thresholds will be different. So more people at a lower income will benefit from this policy. I think it's an important statement because while costs do escalate, I'm also going to be very real with you. And I can take my own personal property as an illustration. I would never get mine assessed. I would never get mine appraised. I would never get PVSC to tell me what my market value of my home is today, because I know very well that it's about $150,000 lower than what it actually could be because of the market. Now that could be temporary, right? It could, yeah, I know. And that's okay. I'm just keeping it real, folks. Just keeping it real. Yeah, I might get, apparently I'm going to get an appraisal next week. So, but I'm just keeping it real. But I think that's true in a lot of cases where market appraisals and market increases have not necessarily caught up to the market itself. So while people's assessments have increased, there's actually quite a bit of room still for market values to increase to the point where it's actually market value. So, and we certainly want to make sure that everybody pays an equitable or a reasonable share of that. But we also don't want to penalize those that are low income. And that's why we're doing this. So long story, but I think it's I just think it's just realistic that our assessments are going up, but the affordability and the ability to pay that is still very good in Argyle. So we want to recognize that we're trying to focus rebates to the people who might need it the most.
Warden Muse?
When I look at the income threshold, this is household income. If there are two people, if there are two people in one resident that each have old age and a supplement, will bring them over the 19,000.
Yes.
Right. So that most of them, if there's two people in any household, they will fall in the second one for the 300, I would say, which is double what they used to get. But, well, yeah, because they would probably just about fall into the second one anyway, right? So anyway, just want to make that point that a single person in a household probably would qualify for that, or there's other people that would as well, you know, depending on what their income is. But if it's a senior couple on both old age and supplement, they wouldn't qualify for the 400. They would probably qualify for the next one.
That's entirely correct.
Yeah.
So the other piece to that puzzle is the fact that if you're a senior on fixed income, you are entitled to the provincial tax
You are.
rebate.
You are.
So the reason why we did it this way was because we wanted to make sure that those that are not on a fixed income, but on low income, get the maximum amount available to them, because they don't have that seniors rebate available. So for them, that's the purpose of this. So you're perfectly correct. Like your observation is bang on, and it was done intentionally because we know that. So what ends up happening is if your tax bill is $500 or $700, you get our rebate first, and then 50% of the difference you get back from the province of Nova Scotia. So if we're giving a rebate, we're actually taking half of that amount off the provincial hook, because if we're paying it, the province won't.
That's right.
They'll only pay 50% of the difference.
Yes.
So does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. And the rebate for the provincial rebate is, I think, $200 is what they get. No, it's half there. I was thinking of the heating, sorry.
It's
No, that's
50% of the rebate to a
50%
maximum of
rebate.
800.
Yes, exactly. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Surratt?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I was looking in this and I listened to what Danny said. I had to focus on that a bit there, what you were saying. Because passing around before Christmas, a lot of homes in my district and a lot of people they're suffering. I mean, I was out again this past couple of weeks trying to help some people who are, struggling out there. And I was hoping that our threshold would have been maybe on that first part would have been around the $24,000 mark. That's what I was kind of looking at, because I think that the first threshold, what you've got at 19,000, you captured 34 people, that's what applied. And I'm saying to myself, by God, there's 34 people in my constituency that are having, big time trouble trying to make ends meet, pay their oil and everything. So I feel that 19,000 threshold is low. I'd like to see that at 24,000, trying to raise that up to 24,000. That's, because even at 19,000 people, that you can't, it's hard to get by. I've seen people, talking to them, this week, and, they're deciding on whether to pay for food, or they're paying, or trying to buy something at Rossi's or wherever in meatballs or whatever, trying to get by to pay the oil. And I find our threshold could have been raised more than the 19. That's my feeling, anyhow, from what I'm seeing. I don't find, when I look at the spreadsheet where we're looking at that we've captured 34 people last year, there's more than that suffering out there. So in other words, they're not meeting that threshold. So if you're getting 34 people, again, this year, although they're getting 400, you're still missing quite a few people that's out there that are struggling. And they're struggling. There's tough times out there. So I would like to see that raised to 24, even if we had to drop it to 300 for the tax exemption, but try to capture more people. That's my spiel. Thank you.
Thank you. And any other comments? So this, we don't approve this. So what is our next steps for this then?
So I think, so the thresholds were carefully selected, but that doesn't mean they can't be looked at and examined before approval. We can certainly take a look at that another time if that's the will of this council, right? So, I think that if we're going to re-examine those thresholds, we typically use a factor in establishing why that amount is what it is. So we can certainly look at those amounts again. I completely understand Councillor Surratt's perspective. What I'm hearing is that rather it be less amount for more people than more amount for less people, is what I'm hearing through that comment. So we can certainly take that back and take another look before the approval. I don't think that you'll still get your 7-day notice. You'll still get enough time to amend any sort of threshold or otherwise before we go out to the community. So I just want to make that clear, that if that's the will of this council, then we can certainly bring that back.
Councillor Digdon?
Thank you. And it's funny thing, he had mentioned it, but I had wrote it down beforehand because I was just looking on the, you went from 19 or from 24-1 up to a maximum of 29. So you went pretty well $5,000 up there, and from 28 to 38, and you went $10,000 up on that one. But the first one, you only went $200 up. And that, so I wrote down what he was saying. So I think it'd be nice if we could at least, look at it again and see if we could bring that number up a little bit. And even if we, I know we've had a very good year as far as our revenue going up. And I know a lot of people had a very bad year as far as their expenses and that. So I honestly don't know if I'd want to see those other numbers, the tax exemption, come down any for the time being. If we could go with the 400, 300, and 200, but bring our threshold up a little bit more on that 19,000 myself.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Board News?
If we went with the 24 and reduced it to 300, then the people that would fit now in the new one, if we leave it the way it is, they will fit in the second one with their 300. You follow what I'm saying?
Yes, I know what you're saying. I was thinking maybe we'd have to change the numbers. I should have said that.
Yeah, because if we change the numbers, these people that we're going to catch now in number 1, we're going to catch them in number 2, regardless, and they're going to get the 300. Yeah, I just want to make that point. Yeah.
Councillor Surratt?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this is for Alain, I'm not going to call it a windfall, that's the wrong word. Our increase in revenue on the assessment, what a 10% number, I was thinking about that today. It was a 10% number, a good number that will be going up in revenues on our residential. Or is that too early for me to?
No, it's not too early. I've done a projection here. I'm just opening it up because I kind of anticipated that you might be interested in that information. So I did talk to Barrington in terms of taking a look, because they usually start their budget very early. So I'd say that 10% is high. First of all, that's a high number. What I would say is that your revenue, and this is really early, right? So your revenue is expected to go up about 6.2%. That's all inclusive.
That's all inclusive.
That's all in. So some of your revenues might go up. I mean, we know that taxation of residential will go up, but in certain instances, there would be some decreases there as well. Your area rates are also up. So in some cases, they'll see that go up as well. But in the end, overall, it's about 6.2% overall. Now, that's just the revenue. So that equates to approximately, I'd say, between $550,000 and $580,000.
Which was my question, very good.
So it's about that number. But what you can't forget is that we're also the cost increases, right?
Great point.
So we have to offset that number towards the increases that could be coming, of which we don't know.
Totally understand.
Right? So your big ones, right? Your school your policing, your waste collection and disposal. Those are your big ones. You have compensation increases that come with CPI and
Yep.
other increases. And so everything is going to go up
Yep.
by a certain percentage. So,
Right.
so while it sounds good,
I know,
right, that it comes with, and oh, by the way,
yes.
right? So I'm still, we're still building the expenditures. I don't know if you're going to be left with something to work with in the end. Typically, it's not a ton, but that's what we're looking at. So 6.2, I think you could probably take that and probably share it, preliminary numbers.
Yeah.
This is what we're looking at.
Yeah.
So that assumes the same rate
That's right.
for both. That's the other thing. That's strictly assessment changes.
Yep.
That does not include any increase or decrease in rates. So you just be careful on how that gets communicated.
Thank you.
Board News?
It's me again. So what would we have to reduce the rate in order to balance that 6.2% increase? You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like, if we were gonna say, okay, we're gonna lower the rate because we're gonna get more income, more revenue. So what would that mean? What would that look like as far as reducing the rate if we had to reduce it to balance that out?
Sorry.
I'm not saying we want to reduce it.
So
I'm asking-
that's going to be, so I want to be very careful about how I answer this because your question assumes that your expenditures remain the same,
Exactly.
which they won't.
They won't, exactly.
But let's just assume some miraculous thing happens and the expenses are precisely the same as last year. So you're up 566,255. So your residential rate, 1 cent, will generate about $52,000. Okay. For one residential rate cent. So for commercial, it's 5,300. So it's much less because there's far less commercial assessment than there is residential assessment. Okay. That's why it's different. So let's just stick with residential because I don't want to confuse the heck out of this.
That's what I would be interested in because that's where I'm getting some calls.
All right. So if you are up 560,000,
yes,
and 52,000 is what you would get on a rate, then the math, which I will do because I am not Rain Man, I can't do it in my head.
Give me some figures.
I'm gonna do that right now. That's about 11 cents residential.
That
11.
That could be dropped to make up for the.
If your expenditures were the same,
even, yes.
it's equivalent to 11 cents on the residential rate. I would caution significantly that is an inaccurate statement.
Yes.
It's not an accurate statement because your
exactly.
expenses are going to go up.
Well, we know that.
And so if they're going to go up 6%, well, the answer is 0
Exactly.
because your revenue went up 6%.
Exactly.
If it goes up, 3.5%, well, then you can do the math. Maybe it's half. And so half of 11 is 5.5.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. We know some are going to go up. We know of some for sure, like policing and.
Oh, there's
We
a
have
100% guarantee that
we
your
have
expenses are going up.
No doubt. That,
Yeah. Like a 100% guarantee that your expenses are going to be higher. Maybe not on every line, on the lines that are the most expensive. Yeah, your schooling, your policing, and your waste are 1, 2, 3. Maybe not in that order, but those are your 1, 2, 3 in terms of your costs that you are either paying the province to provide that service or you're paying for it yourself. And so those will go up. One will go up the increase of your assessment from last year. The other will go up by probably 3%. RCMP last year was 11%, if you remember. So I don't know if I say 3%, it could be 5%. We don't know. So right then and there, you're talking about big dollars right out of the gates on things that you have very little control over. Right. So that's the reality of the situation. So I wouldn't want you to say it's 11 cents, but if somebody said, if you could miraculously leave your expenses the same, yes, it's 11, but that is like 0%.
So waste, policing, and education.
Yeah. Education is your number 1, policing is your number 2, and number 3 is your waste. That's the order.
Counselor Sonia.
Thank you. So our concern here is affordability, and to Councillor Surratt's point, it's with low-income people struggling between groceries and fuel. I would say that some people in the same category pay out differently because their homes heat differently. So, one person, $400 might mean nothing, while $400 might mean a lot to another under the same situation. So I'm wondering if there's another way to look at this and put, instead of an exemption on income, to put a subsidy on the fuel, depending per household that qualify under certain income, rather than just a kind of a blank $400 check for all the categories. Is that a realistic way to look at it?
We can't do that.
Okay.
So what we do have the power to reduce property taxes for low-income residents. So it's not it's a reduction of property taxes based on their income threshold. So that's how this particular policy or policy, I should say, works. We cannot, unless it's through the emergency fund, which is very limited in terms of how it can help someone. We can't actually go and do the fuel rebate. That's something the province does, and certainly something that our social aid committees have done. So there are other avenues for that, but this is the way that we can address that. Now, is the threshold right? Is the amount right? Those are debatable, and certainly up to you. And so we can come back and provide you with some of that information, try to estimate what it would cost you if you went there. But we can't do that particular thing under the MGA.
Counselor Donaldson.
Yeah, I've been looking at the spreadsheet while you guys are talking. Another subject. The exemptions have doubled, right?
Yes.
So getting back to what Guy was saying, even if you're going to fall into a category probably where you're going to get 300 and where you would have only got 200 the year before, right? So I find it's fine the way it is. I mean, you can tweak it around a little here and there, but basically the people are going to qualify for 200 at the very minimum, and that was the maximum you could get before. So I think we're being, I don't know if generous is the right word, but I mean, we're being fair, a lot fairer than we were. And with the provincial province coming out with $1,000 fuel rebate plus a portion of their taxes if they qualify. I mean, there's just so much you can do, and I think this is a good start on changing what we had before. So I would like to see this go to first reading and the way it is myself.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none. So do you have what you need from us for this, for this policy, for this bylaw, council policy?
I can speak on your mic.
Go ahead.
I can speak on your mic.
Okay.
Yeah, so I've heard two positions. One is this is fine, and one is, can you re-examine the threshold? So we'll do both. So you'll have both pieces of information available to you, along with the best guesses that we can have on the financial impact of that. There's no question it's a significant improvement from the last time, but it's up to council to determine whether or not it's enough. It's your policy in the end. So we'll do the best we can to go back on those numbers for you.
Okay,
Great.
thank you.
I agree.
Yep. Okay. Next, we have department head report for operations. So a report was presented. It is attached to the agenda basically for the public, because we've already had the chance to look at that. Anything else any members of council would like to add to that? Okay, seeing none, we will continue on. Number 8 for decision. So for 8A, Fidelis House, there is an attachment. We had a financial request that came December 13th that was made to us that we felt was a bit vague, and we kind of wanted some more information on it. So our executive assistant, Chantal, has given us some information here. We had requested what We were wondering what the other units were doing, and they have asked them to go through their grants to organizations. So what is the wish of council on this one? What would we like to do for this one? Warden Muse.
I would say that we do the same. It's a grant to an organization, and let them apply the same way as any other organizations through our grants to organization in the spring or fall or whenever. So if you need a motion for that, I'm willing to make that motion that's what we do with this organization.
Do we have a seconder on that motion? Okay, seconded by Councillor Saulnier. Any questions on that? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded? Motion carried. The next one is fire service review. So there are two attachments. There's an RFD and there is a letter. The letter, the attachment summarizes basically, we've been talking about this for quite some time. We've been talking about this before our two new councillors came on. We often talk about the importance of our fire departments for our municipality and how we always feel like we're doing the best we can, but we always wonder if it's enough. We had a presentation by Dwayne Hunt, I believe, was that his name? Dwayne Hunt, who had talked, he's from Barrington, who had talked about how they're doing their fire coordination. It was very interesting. It was informative, but we also felt that it couldn't really come from us. That really, if there are going to be changes, we felt like the fire departments had to be willing, had to be on board, had to come forward. And there is a letter attached from Joe Dion, who is in support of basically having us begin the process of looking into our fire services. So if you look at the RFD, basically we're not looking to approve anything. It's basically just to get a working group of staff and volunteer firemen and other resources as required to produce a multi-year recommendations and action plan to modernize firefighting service in our municipality. Are there questions, comments? I see Councillor Surratt.
Just be a comment, they're ready. They're ready. I see it, I've talked to them, and they're ready. This is why this letter is here.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Councillor Digdon?
Thank you. The only thing I was going to see, CAO's recommendation, to develop a working group of staff and volunteer firefighters.
Good point.
Might be there. Because we have a lot of women that are
Yes.
volunteering their time there now as well. And that, so just
Gender neutral.
gender neutral.
What did I say?
Firemen.
Oh, I said firemen. Oh, was as the legal the law says
It's-
that the use of male means both. So
Okay.
I'm hoping that maybe you could forgive me there.
It
We'll
can,
forgive
but just firefighter sounds
Yeah,
like.
of course. It's a much
Listen,
better word.
it's been your first mistake this year, sir. It's
Goodness.
Quite right.
Okay, so what is the wish? Any other comments or questions? There is a suggested motion there. The suggested motion is that we move that the CAO be authorized to commence the review of current firefighting services in Argyle and provide multi-year recommendations and actions for both municipality and fire departments. And the deadline for the report is March 31st, 2024. Councillor Digdon.
I would be willing to make that motion.
Okay, motion by Councillor Digdon, seconded by Councillor Saulnier. Any other questions or comments on that? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary minded, motion carried. The next one we have is 8C, request for relief of taxes. These often come up. We have a property, okay, Councillor Digdon.
That's just make a motion and request to relieve the amount of $540.22.
Excellent. Do we have a seconded by Councillor Boudreau? Questions on that? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded, motion carried. Correspondence and for information. Number 9, the first one is 9A, letter to Southwest Nova Biosphere. So this is a letter that our deputy CAO wrote to it was about the tree planting. I read this one, yeah, and you provided a couple of locations where they could plant trees. Next, we have YQI, so the Yarmouth International Airport Corporation. I was really happy to see a report like this. I really was. Go ahead, Councillor Surratt.
Just to say, yes, this was a recommendation from the airport committee, the board, that it's something we brought up because there's questions going around every time you come to a meeting, whether it be the municipality of Argyle, town, or there's questions, councillors want to know where's our money going.
Right.
And I see some improvements coming in the next year. I can see next year that there'll be some, I mean, this is positive, but there's some stuff moving, as you can see.
Right.
So it's positive, and just want to let you know that it's going the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sonia?
I have a question for the one we just went by there, the tree planting.
Yes.
The Gableton around Tuscan Ball Field. Is that proximity of these trees being planted right close to the ball field?
I actually wondered if you were going to have a question about that. Go ahead.
Because, you know, in the past, I've played ball and a lot of foul balls, and we would hire or look for volunteers to clear these spaces, especially for foul balls and over the backstop. And well, my home runs, those you can't find anyhow. So we won't discuss yeah.
So, very good question, Counselor.
What I'm saying is that the recreation department might be interested in that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a very good question, Counselor Sonia. It is, before, if you read the letter, they're supposed to contact us before they start planting so that we could kind of set up a plan where they could plant. And I understand your concern around, you know, where you're going to put the trees with balls flying, whatever. But if you're aware of the Tuscan Ball Field, that is one of the worst balls field to find a foul ball. So because there are tall grass and shrubs and all that stuff, so my hope would be, if they do decide to choose that site, that we would do like a wall of trees on both sides of the left field and the right field side, so that it may save some balls from going out in the tall grass or in the bushes that you can't find right now. So that is why we chose that site.
Yeah.
But totally understand where you're coming from, but I'm hoping that it will help that.
Yeah, because we used to have a lot of trouble with that.
Yeah. There is a lot of trouble right now with the Tuscan Ball Field, so that's, you know, hoping that would help that. The other piece is we've had some discussions with the Recreation Department around possibly doing, increasing the parking lot in that area eventually down the road, maybe not soon. But so if you're doing a parking lot, you also want to protect the parking lot from the balls hitting the cars. So if you plant a row of trees there, that could save the cars too, so.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. 9C, Yarmouth Seaport Incorporated Board of Directors, Deputy CAO.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you know, that's the new board that's replacing the YIC, correct? Yes, Yarmouth Area Industrial Commission. Just wanted to be sure. Yeah. And there was a request to find board members for this new board. We have put the ad out a couple of times on our Facebook page, and we've also used our new simple texting, and we've received no response from nobody. So at this point, I guess I just want to let you guys know, and maybe what I'll do is probably early next week, I would send you an email for potential names, and in the email, I'll kind of give you a detail of what the type of ideal candidate that we're looking for, so that maybe you can share that with us, and then myself with the CAO can kind of look at those names, and then we can maybe come up with somebody, if that works for council.
Sounds good. Thank you. 9D, coldest night of the year invitation. There is an attachment. Warden Muse.
I'm a counselor too.
Yes.
Yeah, I spoke with Wanda this afternoon, and she kind of wondered, because I don't know that, I know I hadn't answered. We had a team in there last year, and she mentioned that. She said it was so nice to see members of councils that would take part in that. And I said, well, unfortunately, we don't have a team. But she's asked me if I would go anyway to bring greetings from the municipality. And I told her I would be there on Saturday night to at least show that the municipality is definitely in favor of what they're doing. So just want to let you know that. So.
Thank you. We'll move on to 10, financial requests. We have a 10A District Community Grant request for the Wedgeport Nature Trail Committee for $500 from Councillor Boudreau.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Financial request of $500 for the Wedgeport Nature Trail. Yeah.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, motion carried.
Thank you.
And then 10B, District Community Grant, Plymouth Hall, $500 from Councillor Sonia.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to give $500 to Community Hall for the financing of the community center.
Moved and seconded. Questions on that? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded, motion carried. Thank you. And are there agenda topics for our next meeting or any notice of motion by councillors? Okay, seeing none. Question period? Nothing in question period. So we will move on to our in-camera session. So can we have a motion to go in camera, please? Seconded. Seconded by Councillor Sonia. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded. Motion carried.